And what I'd like to do is start with a brief introduction of Joe. Joe is one of our Mighty Dot coaches, and he's been here from the beginning. We're really glad to have him working with us and working with our community of professionals and ambitious leaders and entrepreneurs from all different industries located in many places around the world.
Mhm.
A lot of our community is based in North America, which is why most of our examples focus there. And let me start by saying that Dr. Joe Rios completed his PhD at Stanford University in International Comparative Education and the Anthropology of Communication. And his experience in working multicultural and multilanguage linguistically didn't start at Stanford. He grew up in a multilingual, multicultural background, and he worked overseas for over 15 years and now speaks 5 languages.
Hmm.
His background also includes working with native Chinese speakers going back to the 1980s when he was lecturing in China while researching the challenges native Chinese speakers have communicating using new languages. His methods are a result of training, coaching, and teaching Chinese people around the world and using experience-based approaches to learning with live performance to develop confidence and influence. So he's very experienced and he's very popular among native Chinese speakers in our community. There's a couple other interesting points about you, Joe, that I'd like you to express. Like you have a deep experience in DEI. Can you share something about that?
Right. Well, when I was at Stanford, my research was in that field of cross-cultural communication. And then I went to work for the Chicago School of Psychology as I became sort of their DEI point person as a consultant. And then I designed a training program to build diversity officership. So across their 5 campuses, it's about 1,000 employees and I don't know how many students, but it's a big school. But basically all PhDs, MAs, it's a graduate school. But the trick was it's extremely diverse, the faculty and the students. So it was a tough nut to crack and it took several years, but we've got there is an official program that's up now. It's a diversity officer training program, and we put a lot of work into building that.
How does that compare to what you're doing with the Google Brain team?
Well, that's very interesting. Google Brain was a result of, I had been coaching there for a number of years basically, these are mid-level managers who wanted to become leaders, move up in degree. And mostly Chinese, although I had South Asian as well, Russians. But they really, the word got out that I did a lot of that communication work. And so there's an AI project that hired me on full-time, regular time. Then I did that project for a few years, but then now I've gone back to coaching those execs, that is to say, level 7, if you know Google, and higher, going up, trying to just become VPs now. There are folks who are really reaching up to VP-ship.
That's
So,
great.
yeah.
And I understand you're also working with Columbia on a special program. Can you share some insights on that?
Yeah, the Columbia Group is really exciting. Columbia Business School, they have a boot camp that they run in China. And I was going there until COVID, but now we run it online. We'll be having one in February, actually, January. And there it's basically about, in all my work, I'm coming at how do you use communication to enhance whatever you do or be the best at that thing. It's a skill set, right? That can be learned. All of this we're going to talk about tonight. So with the Columbia Project, I am the boot camp lead in charge of, and these are mostly high school kids, early college. They're all going overseas. They're going to, 5-star universities in the States, Harvard, wherever. And we connect them with different folks in the States, but mainly our program really helps them think through 3 things. One is how to design an idea from ideation through, kind of an MVP, a minimal product, to how, and then secondly, to how to work together in teams across China, because the kids are placed in different cities. So that online work is really tricky. And third, really the bottom line is how they communicate and learn about what it takes to really express yourself clearly in a second language and the challenges of that. And it's not just details of pronunciation. It's much deeper than that. It's the EQ you need to stay calm.
Yeah, great. Well, enough of the appetizer. We can now go into the main course. Thank you for uh, all that rich background.
Appreciate you asking.
Let's, yeah, let's talk about the holiday season here because that's the focus of what we're going to dive into. For many people, holidays are like a weird time of the year, especially if you're coming from outside the culture and outside the country and you're in a work environment which is already like a different type of experience for many people. Let's talk about what opportunity the holiday season is for people to expand their network or expand their influence. You want to give us some perspective?
Well, I think you said the key word there, opportunity. Seize it. Do not hesitate. This is once a year, and folks are warmer, friendlier, and happier because of the season. And secondly, one thing that I think people overlook is that individuals, that is to say, even though, let's say, Christmas is a national holiday, it is incredibly particular to the individual that is the family unit. So I know if I asked you, Mark, and 10 other Americans, what was Christmas like for you growing up? We'd all hear 10 different stories. We all remember, have links to some very special, particular family traditions that are overlain into what is the tradition of, what everyone knows, the Christmas trees and all that. But each family. So Mark, let me ask you this question right now. Is there a particular tradition that your family had that maybe was kind of unique around the holiday?
Yeah, we used to belong to a country club. I lived in Florida where it was always warm. And we go have like a big lunch at the club and then spend the whole day in the pool.
Very interesting. So there you go. Pardon me. We associate often Christmas with winter and the cold, and there you have it. That's something I did not expect because at all, especially I'll be in snow probably.
Yeah,
So
when I went off to college and compared notes, everyone else, not everyone else, but a lot of people would spend the whole Christmas in their living room opening gifts and having a fire in the chimney or going skiing, cross country skiing, or, other people would go visit relatives because they're from a small town and they had a lot of relatives living nearby. So different traditions for different folks in different parts of the country, right?
great. So taking a little higher level view here for everyone who is here today. This is really a great example of connecting with someone around a topic that we all know is important to everyone, the holidays. What we've just discovered right now is somewhat of a surprise that wow, yes, Christmas goes on in warm weather. I'm talking from my perspective. So when you're asking questions, what from your perspective surprises you, and then build on that. So this is the opportunity perhaps to allow that person, or for me, if I want to be assertive, to speak up and say, that's funny. I grew up in the mountains, in the snow. Or maybe I say something that's more what I grew up with, which is I grew up in LA. So I kind of grew up in warm weather, but winter was very chilly. All I'm doing here is I'm trying to find that point of overlap and connect, because we prefer to be with people who are like us.
Mhm.
And until you find that point of overlap, and I don't care how different you are, that is phenotypically, meaning, visually, racially, or our backgrounds in terms of our studies, our skill set. None of that will matter if you find that overlap. And the overlap right now we're talking about is Christmas and how we celebrate it, the difference in this. And there's a little bit of a laugh around it, and you laugh with it, and you take it to the next place. So Mark, let me ask you a different question.
Mhm.
Okay. So did you feel that your family, you had all these images of snow? Did you grow up in Florida, or did you move to Florida, or were you ever around one of those, we always see these movies, what are
Yeah.
these famous movies, these Christmas holiday movies? We've got to share one with everybody. What's a famous holiday movie?
The one I like to use is A Christmas Story is a great one.
That's a great
It's
one.
very popular among different generations of Americans. It's a story about it takes place earlier, like in the 1960s, with a young boy who's experiencing Christmas and he really wants a certain gift. Because in the old days, you used to just get one Christmas gift. and he was wanting this one thing.
Mhm.
And I don't want to tell you what it is because I don't want to spoil that movie if you're going to see it. Christmas Story, A Christmas Story. It's a classic. It'll give you a lot of insights about, like the feast that's prepared and the tradition of engaging other people and going to the big store in your town to sit on Santa's lap and share what you're wishing for, and the whole experience of waiting in line for your turn. It's
Mhm.
it's funny. So
So,
that's the movie I would recommend, but there are several, you know.
right. There's so many. There's my favorite is A Christmas Carol, which is
Yeah.
actually a story by Dickens. And
Hmm.
the reason I like that story, now, if you just to take again this out of the fishbowl view here, what I've done, and this is very American actually. Mark has given his favorite movie. Now I've jumped in like one would jump in jump rope. I've jumped in now, and I am offering my experience. And that's interesting because around the world culturally, that doesn't always happen. That's seen as somewhat almost egotistical, and me, and I. And you see Americans talking like this all the time. I did this, and it's like keeps going and going, it never ends. It's kind of shocking to someone who wasn't born in that culture. But it's very common for us to, as soon as one person stops, this is my point here, the other one jumps in. And what they often jump in with is about me. And that is not what all cultures do. You don't just start talking about me. So I will do this though. I'm going to say my favorite movie is this story of Dickens' Christmas Carol. And the reason I like it is because of the message. And the message is that Scrooge is not really this evil, cheap guy. The main character is actually just a person, a human without a purpose.
Hmm.
And then Mark could respond to that, and we could go on and on. But I won't. I'll do another thing that's very important in small talk is we got to stop this conversation so we can get on to the next thing. So closing a conversation is a very important skill. It's an art. And, I've been at networking events where someone will say to me, oh, you know what? I have a call I've got to make. Excuse me. Or that's not very tactful, but maybe they might say something like, it was really nice meeting you. I have to go talk to my friend Bill over there, and maybe we can talk a little later. Or, you don't have a card, do you? Maybe we could talk later, especially if you have a lot of interest. When you're networking, it's one thing to open, as Mark and I are doing now. It's another thing to close, because you can't spend all night with this person.
If I could make a recommendation,
Please do, Mark.
if you're at a Christmas party and you're having this conversation and you feel like you've established the rapport, you've gotten to know the person, but really those Christmas gatherings at work, whether they're at a restaurant or they're in your office or even just in the cube and office area, you can break away gracefully by introducing that person to someone else you know. Say, hey, do you know Susan? Hey, Susan, have you met Bill? And then once they start talking and they gather, you say, oh, excuse me, I have to go say hello to someone. And that's another graceful way that you can step away and find someone else you don't know, because that's a target rich environment. That is a great opportunity because everyone's being festive. People aren't like, well, I got to answer this phone call, or I got to do this email, or I have to work on a presentation. We're all there to celebrate together. So that's a great time. Find people you don't know. Find people you don't know. If you've never spoken to the VP and you're in that organization, wonderful. You go up and say, happy holidays. Let me introduce myself, right? And then use that 1 minute. Someone was asking about the 1 minute to say, I'm so-and-so, I'm in this group, I'm working on this project, and I was really inspired by your speech at the last town hall. I'm actually using part of that on my project, or something like that. And then they would say, oh,
Mhm,
really? Oh, that's fascinating. And then they would ask you a question.
mhm.
How do you feel about that, Joe?
And that's a great point, Mark. And I think you're alluding to another question that came up in the chat about assertiveness.
Mhm.
And so to do what Mark just said, you have to do what is sometimes the hardest thing to do is to just do it.
Mhm.
Now, I like to talk about the 3-second rule, which is you got about 3 seconds to do it. So let's say you see the VP over there and you start thinking, oh, I should do, I heard this guy Mark the other night at Mighty, and he's fantastic. Mark's such a great coach. And he said, you just got to do this. And it's the holidays, so I'm going to go do it. And about second one, you start thinking, well, but and you don't know what that thing is, but something starts holding you back. Second, two, you're going, I don't know, how do I say that? And the biggest problem, having worked with so many Chinese over the years, is this processing piece. The Chinese very often will, from my observation, will have the idea. Well, they're spending a lot of time formulating the language part of the idea, how they're going to say it. They start getting nervous thinking about it. That alone is taking a lot of time, and it's showing up as blank-faced silence to everyone. This happens a lot when you get a question and answer part experience as well. Someone will ask you a question and you kind of blank. It's not because you don't have the idea at all. You're formulating. And in Chinese and Asia, generally, you can do that. You can take your time. Wait time is fine. But in America, you show up as weaker, and slowness is weakness. So the idea of the 3-second rule for me is say something, because after about 3 seconds, and there's research on this, it says 3 seconds, it turns into fear. And once you're in fear, it's over.
Yeah.
You're not going to say anything.
Those are good points. Those are good points. Remember that everyone who's at that Christmas party is there for the same reason you are.
Exactly.
One, it's to enjoy with colleagues. And two, everyone is there expecting to meet people. If you walked by people in hallways, or you've been in the same meeting and never had a chance because there was a packed agenda and people had to leave quickly, this is why everyone's at those holiday get-togethers.
Right, Mark. And that's a conversion of mindset too, because the other side of that is it's a joy. It should be a joy to meet people. And if that is not your mindset, that's because of all these other things that are interfering. Communication is about the two-way thing, but in between, there's all this interference, and EQ helps with that. But there's this huge amount of interference, layers of it, that stops us from really not just doing something, but enjoying it. I mean, there's nothing lost here. On the contrary, the gain on the other end is huge, because as I was mentioning earlier, you build a reputation. The three areas that I think we all need to build reputation to have influence in work as a leader is really to be able to be known as a personable human, that you can get along with anyone, anywhere, anytime, but also that you can be assertive and you can draw boundaries and be kind. And then the last thing is be able to articulate, and I don't mean in just pronunciation, I mean to be able to really formulate ideas with flow, without hesitation. This is really an art. And if you really look at the great leaders, global leaders, they do this with ease. Why are people following them? So this holiday season is a time to practice, play, find out what's the worst that's going to happen. The worst that's going to happen is that maybe it won't come out right, but your effort is always appreciated. It's always appreciated because you're trying. Don't you think, Mark? I mean, people, I know you don't want to blow it in a big way, but you won't. As long as you follow the 3-second rule and jump in, your brain will catch up with you. This is the way I like to look at it. Once you start talking, this is what we learned, Mark and I learned growing up, is that you just say something and then the brain catches up with it and it knows what to say. We know what to say, but you just program your brain to act.
It reminds me of that expression. What's the fastest way to get to Carnegie Hall?
Not sure.
Practice, practice, practice. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Carnegie Hall, that's like the most famous place in the US to give a performance. Carnegie Hall is like the most sophisticated and most prestigious performance auditorium in the country. You get to Carnegie Hall, you are like the best in your genre. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? The fastest, practice, practice, practice. And that's what Joe's saying is you can sit here thinking in your mind, what is that 1-minute elevator pitch, and keep trying to perfect it in your mind. But the way to perfect it and make it natural is to have a few key things you want to express and then arrange them in the order you think, and then just go. Whatever words come out, the more you do it, the more you will refine the language, the more you will perfect your pronunciation. It'll get smoother. And guess what? Over time, it will change as you change, or as situations, different situations, you may adapt that for your audience.
Mark, that's a great point that you're alluding to, also the preparation behind it. I think someone asked about that. You prepare that 1 minute. That's your elevator talk, presentation of self. That's got to be nailed down.
Yeah.
That's a fact. But then you try it out and you're right. Everything else starts to work because when you nail it down, nailing it down means to, yeah, you perfect your pronunciation on it. You perfect how you present it and how you show up with it. Once it's done in muscle memory,
Yeah.
then you just click on the switch. That's a critical piece. The second thing is also doing what Mark just did right now as a conversational small talk tactic. It's really brilliant. That reminds me of a story.
Yeah.
That's a brilliant technique for small talk. Just trust yourself to, that is to say, if you connect with someone, you're not just connected intellectually, you're connected psycho-emotionally. There's something there that lets your emotions pop up, flow up, and express themselves. And that's what Mark does a lot. That reminds me of a story or a joke. We all think humor in a different culture is hard. It's not that humor, if you take the approach Mark did, it's basically, and we all have stories, from our culture and from our families. But Mark, for the sake of time here, I'm wondering if you didn't have, I was thinking too about some questions related to your experiences with the holidays and diversity, because this comes up a lot. And and I've heard you talk about this before. So I had that question for you. Any thoughts on that? Any do's and don'ts, things to be careful with? Because not everybody celebrates Christmas in America, for example.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so the things, when you're meeting somebody new and you don't know anything about them, maybe you've only seen them in the hall, or you've never seen them ever, and they're now in your departmental organizational Christmas party or meeting. You don't want to ask closed questions like, do you celebrate Christmas? Right? Because what if they're Muslim or atheist or Jewish, right? Or what are you going to give your kids for Christmas? And they're like, well, me and my wife don't have kids. Ooh, that might be a sore topic. Or what are you and your wife going to do for Christmas if it's a young person? You don't even know if they're married or what their orientation is. So you have to be very sensitive. And I always recommend starting with very open questions, more like, so any big plans for the holidays? Anything exciting you're expecting to do over the holidays? Or what are you looking forward to in the holidays? And that's just like open, because everyone gets the holiday break. It's the most harmless way to start the conversation at a holiday party. Joe, how do you feel about that?
I really like that question. What are you looking forward to? That's a beautiful question. And then you let them talk.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
And what if they don't answer well? What if they say nothing special?
Then you keep going to the next question and the next question after that. There's always something. And if someone, Mark, but you know this as well as I do, better than I do probably, that because you've worked all over the world, is that if someone is not responding to your questions like that, they fall flat, then you let it go. You don't push. You come up with maybe a second question, but there may be all kinds of reasons why that person doesn't have a response. And there could be a sad reason behind that question. But at some point, you let go of pushing someone. I think
Right.
that's
And
no.
always be thinking too, like with that example. So you have any big plans for the holidays? No, nothing special. How I might react to that is to think, okay, I have a ski trip, but that's 3 days. The rest of my holiday is nothing special.
There we
What
go.
am I doing then? And then I might share back to that person, say, yeah, I've got to clean out my garage. I'm going to, reorganize my file cabinet. So I'm right with you, you know.
That's brilliant, Mark. I like that.
Do you have anything you have anything as boring as that going on? And they may say, yeah,
Yeah, my life is better than that, right? Yeah,
yeah. So
it's a
but
good,
try to
good one.
build bridges, when they throw something out like they got no exciting plans, look for something boring in your plans and try to offer it up. So yeah,
Mhm.
I hear you. I got these nothing special things going on too over the holidays, right?
That's really good. So there's an element of dealing with silence or the flat response situation. And I think that's brilliant. You find the commonality in that experience. That you made me think of that actually, Mark. But that's a
Yeah.
good, by the way, this is a good meta, to take a meta view again, good conversation technique again, small talk, is that this language of you made me think of something.
Mm.
Learning these connective phrases, these opening phrases and closing phrases in English straight up, memorizing them, that makes me think of something, or that reminds me of a story. You made me think of something right now. Stay connected, and all that stuff pops up. Stay open and curious. So you made me think of something there, Mark, in that many times over the holidays, the vacation time can be fairly long depending on where you work, or there are always extra days in there or something, and they're down days. And if they're a couple, you're just sitting around. But if there's more time, for some reasons, I have two friends, they're married and they can't see their kids this year for some reasons, so they're going to have a lot of downtime. And we talked about it, and they're worried about being bored.
Mhm.
So we've all experienced that. So that's the question.
Let me toss a question out that's
Yep,
coming from chat. It's come
please.
up a few times, so I want to make sure we're able to contribute back to the community with some answers. So we keep hearing about what is assertiveness
Mm.
in this particular topic. When you're at the event or you're in part of a discussion, what does it mean to be assertive in these types of engagements and discussions? You want to share an insight there, Joe?
Well, to me is what I like to do. I'm a little bit extreme, okay? And but I like to look around the room and of course choose someone I don't know and pick more than likely the least likely person I would talk to. I deliberately look for someone that I'm maybe even don't want to talk to, that because our perception tends to be reality, as we know. And so I'm very careful. And so I'm always practicing because it's not easy. And I will go out and especially, we're talking business context, and you don't know their position or anything, but you look for that. I pick someone very unlikely and I will practice and I'll see what happens. But by doing that, what it allows me, what I try to do, second point, is to be as relaxed as possible. I want a situation where it's kind of low stakes in a weird kind of way, where I can just practice. And practice here just means it's authentic practice. It's not fun practice. It's just, I want to see how I do introducing myself and talking to someone that I really not only don't know, but for me as a native speaker, is really far afield from who I might talk to.
Mm.
I see networking as an opportunity, and a lot of people may not agree with this, but I'm not hyper practical about that. I like to meet diverse peoples who maybe in some context don't on the surface seem like I might have anything in common with, or some kind of a relationship with, professional relationship with. But I do that because it's practicing more the art of being personable
Mm.
and then seeing what happens. And by the way, incredible things happen. You have such a diverse country and you ask certain questions, you'd be surprised what you learn. And it just brightens your day. And not only that, it deepens your knowledge
Mhm.
and awareness of who is not only who is in the room, but who lives in this country. You'd
Yeah.
be shocked.
Let me add a second example. So that was one good example of being assertive, is having your target and engaging and making those moves to become effective. I'm going to give a different example of assertive. Is you're in a small circle at one of these parties, and there's maybe 5 or 6 of you standing around, and there's these two people that are just talking back and forth, and the other 3 people are just staring there. So what you don't want to do is become a statue.
There you go.
Just stand there with a blank look on your face while these two people talk. Smile,
Yes.
nod your head, make eye contact with these people, and they'll look at you. And then, you may have an opening. One of them may stop, and then you can come and ask a question. Guess what? If they make their eye contact and they just keep talking back and forth, and you're not acting like a statue anymore, you're smiling, you're making eye contact, then what you might do is you nod your head. Yeah, yeah, right. Or if one of them says something interesting, you make a reaction. You go, "Oh, wow. Can you tell me what that means?" Or, "I heard about that." Right? Does this mean this, or what does that mean exactly? I've been trying to look into it. So when they say something really exciting or interesting, react, make a noise, get their attention, and then ask an open question. You become part of the discussion. And then a nice thing to do, once you've got it a three-way conversation instead of two, is try to bring in the other people as well. Make it more of a group activity instead of just 2 people or 3 people out of 6, right? So those are some ways you can not only be assertive, Charlie, and become part of that discussion, but it's a way you become a leader. You're bringing people in and you're changing the direction of the engagement to everybody's benefit, right? Because that's the purpose of the party. And if you do it the way I've just described it, just kind of gradually, upgrading your participation in that engagement, everyone will appreciate it. It'll be assertive versus aggressive. Now, Joe, why don't we shift gears real quick
Sure.
and just talk a bit more about the sensitivity around DEI. And then I want to give you a chance to introduce a special program that you're created for native Chinese speakers in Western environments. Why don't we talk a little bit
Great.
about DEI in closing?
Sure. My thoughts on DEI right now in 2022, as we go into 2023, is its complexity, and it is atomized. It has very small pieces to it right now, and I think we're going through a phase right now with DEI, which is, I think it's kind of an atomization process where every group has a voice and is expecting to be respected for that voice. It's intersectional. We're no longer talking about being one thing, but many things. We're a mosaic, there's a mosaic mentality that's evolved.
Mhm.
No one is just one thing. And,
Mhm.
and I say a process because I really think that we're going to go through this process where we're going to find more similarity once we've earned and demanded for many the respect of your individuality, your group identity, and all of that. I think once we go, everyone has expressed that, then we'll get to a place of, okay, what we have in common is this humanity. That's my hope, and that's the way I teach it.
And DEI is an acronym. Some people may not
Yeah,
be familiar with that.
yeah, diversion, equity, and inclusion, and equity, diversity. I'm sorry, diversity is, of course, realization that we are diverse, and equity is distinguished between equality from equality. I mean, equity is it's a philosophical term, actually. In philosophy, it's a very interesting term, but equity is really about if there's a pie and we divide it up into 4 parts. We have 4 people, and we divide it equally into 4 parts. That's called equality. But there could be someone who has never taken, who maybe has no opportunity ever to eat a pie, and the rest of us eat it all the time. And we say, no, well, look, let's give the whole pie to that one person. That's kind of an equitable decision. So it's not always that equity, that is equality is an issue that doesn't always apply. In fact, equity is introduced into this American notion of diversity because it's precisely that very often the ones who are quote unquote disadvantaged merit better services. And inclusion, of course, is an interesting proposition because that means that not only are you recognized for your diversity and respected for it and helped out equitably, that you are included at the table so that when you sit down to dinner, there's actually a chair there for you. And so I think these are important notions that, again, they're very vague. When I was on a diversity committee at Google, and I was very firm about defining organizationally and personally defining what does that mean for you, diversity, because it's quite ethereal as a term. And then inclusion and the equality, we need to operationalize those terms always in our organizations.
That's great. And of course, you are a DEI expert. And, as an executive, the way I always looked at DEI is diversity is showing the respect that
Mhm.
all these different people all have a right to be the way they are and to, not feel like they're being isolated or treated differently. And
Correct.
then the inclusion part is everybody wants to enjoy work and feel like they are being treated equally. So you include everyone in the right levels of information and access as appropriate to their role and their
Mhm.
function. And the equity part always was my most important of the 3 E's, because if people feel like they have equity in the department,
No, that's
in
true
the
too.
company, in the organization, they're going to give you 100% because
That's
they
nice.
feel like they own their project or they feel they have an equal stake as an employee,
Mm.
in the process or in the outputs, right? So,
Mhm.
if people don't feel like they have any equity, they give up ownership, they give up responsibility, then it's just a job for a paycheck. And you can't really lead people if they don't feel like they have equity, right?
That's great. That's a really good point that equity, the word equity is like a coin in this case. It does have more than one meaning. And that's why I really do like the notion of DEI because you get a lot packed into a set of notions. And again, what you just said about your definition of diversity is a great one then to ask your team, how do we put that into action? What would that look like for? And that gets where it gets really interesting because you're diverse. Um, and diversity, as we know, as we all know on teams, that the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. When you have all those ideas and they're respected, the outcomes and the output is tremendously, it's 10x in terms of quality.
Perfect. Hey, I'd like to spend the last 5 minutes here before we turn the floor over to Kathy on the special program you've pulled together
Oh yeah, right.
and what's so special about it. So thank you. So take it away, Joe.
Yeah, right. Great. Well, I'm fascinated by this notion of influence, and I have been for a long time, especially as it applies to Chinese professionals. I worked a lot with managers, especially now more than ever, managers becoming global leaders, VPs, and so on. And I like to think influence is akin to having a superpower because it's so hard to pin down what is it and what does it take. So I've kind of built a program that is structured around 4 pillars of both experience and information that help you go from what are some of the essentials we're talking about tonight to becoming a very impactful presenter of information. And when you combine the 4 ideas, and here they are, the first idea is really you learning to use your presence, your use of language and listening to be able to flow almost in a way like a river might in your conversational ability with others so that you connect with them as we were tonight. It has to do with everything ranging from small talk, but also to how you say what you say, where you emphasize what you emphasize, not just for the obvious things like meaning. We all know that about English, where you put emphasis gets meaning, but it's the emotional undercurrent to that water that when combined is really powerful. But there's a linguistic structural way to do that. And so you learn the basics of really how to move your body. So it's a lot of fun. That is, use your voice, your body. I have a lot of fun techniques for that. It's great. And then the second idea is basically you have to, what I see a lot of folks don't know how to express themselves fully. So we drill down, we unpack what it means to put emotion into expression. And people often look at emotion as, oh, we keep that out of life and the workplace, and you don't want to do that, show it. But but in the American business context, it's very important to use the right dose at the right time. And that includes understanding how the mind, the body, and the voice connect. And you've got to combine those 3 like a piano chord to work at the same time so that the impact, that is, you learn first before you can really do it, I think. You learn how it works and holds together and you practice it. Then the third pillar and really important part is really, so how to speak up and be remembered. And speaking up has 2 dimensions to it, really. One is being assertive. You have to know when to speak up, not hesitate, and what you're really trying to do. Always know your purpose. Why am I talking? Why am I interrupting? Is it worth it? Is it worth fighting for what I'm going to say right now? Because that's all we want. Assertiveness is really about asserting your freedom and being honest. And so the question is that overlays into how then you present yourself. And then when you speak, you learn to be very clear, concise, and as we know, compelling. But compelling, I like to think, is the 4th pillar. Compelling is really about your ability to express yourself with charisma. And what is charisma? We all think the other guy has charisma, and I don't. That is completely not true. The essence of charisma is another interesting box to unpack. It's really about you bringing your voice to that clear, concise way of talking that has learned how to put emotion into the way you express and can flow with the language. all of those three pillars combined allow you, give all the platform for you to express yourself, with your own personal style, with what I call charisma. When I listen to Kathy Pung talk, she has all of these things, but I see Kathy in there. When Mark talks, he has all of these three pillars, but when I see him finally get into delivering message and conveying information, I see Mark in there. You don't want to lose yourself. I want to see all of you, more of you. So I hope you learn how to drive that incredible Ferrari communication set you have. We're not using it all. So that's what this course is about.
So let me summarize. So there's 4 topics with a QR code at the bottom. You can take any or all of those individually. Each of those topics is 2 sessions, 1 hour each, on a Sunday at 4 p.m. And you can see the dates when they start. The first of each 2 sessions is listed there, right? The 8th and the 15th of January for topic 1, as an example. Each of them is $149 per person. That's a great deal. A better deal is if you take all 4 together. And that's what we have in this green box in the upper right-hand corner, the 8-part course. It's only $400. So you're really saving $196 if you intend to take all 4 by going with that option. Just get them all up front. So I suggest you scan the QR codes. There's more details about each of these 4 topics on the Mighty website in the event calendars. And before we hand over the floor to Kathy, someone was something caught my eye here from Xiping Lai. Like what are good topics to use in a small group, right? And I'm going to give you a cheat code. Everybody is familiar with the car brand Ford, F-O-R-D. Ford. Just remember that when you go into a small group setting, is F stands for friends and family, primarily family. O is occupation. R is recreation. And D is desires. So if you put those in context, like my example for what are you planning to do over the holidays, anything you're looking forward to in the holidays, that is the D in Ford, desires. What are you looking forward to? What are you expecting? What are you planning to do that's like in your future? I could have also done F, like, are you celebrating with anyone special over the holidays? If I don't know if they're married, single, parents, right? So that would be like, hey, you gonna celebrate with anyone special over the holidays? Could be college roommates going for a ski trip, right? You open it up. That's F. O is occupation. So what do you do in the company? What's your role in the organization? That's a great starter at a holiday party. That's O. And then R is recreation. So what are you gonna I guess one recreational thing is hey, are you interested in the new dance movie that came out, right? If they're a dancer. Or did you catch the football game? Or are you going to watch the Super Bowl? Are you following FIFA? That's all recreation related. Are you watching the World Cup matches? So FORD. And now with that in closing, I want to thank Joe first, who's now going to drop and go join the VIPs in a different Zoom meeting, and turn the floor over to Kathy.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you, Joe.